If you have a Meade LX200 Classic telescope, this video is for you. We'll show you how to get inside and access all the major parts of this scope. Keep watching to learn how to remove and replace both drive assemblies, the power panel and power panel PC board, and the motherboard in the base of the telescope. First, a quick rundown on tools. You'll need a number 1 Phillips-head screwdriver, 1/16, 5/64, and 9/64 hex wrenches, and long nose pliers. You may also need a utility knife. Now let's get started. Before we do anything else, we need to disconnect the power. Then we can get the hand controller and deck cables out of the way. Always make sure power is off before you unplug these. We'll start the process by removing the power panel. There are 4 screws fastening the cover plate to the base. We'll just remove those and save them somewhere they won't get lost or mixed up. After they're out, we can lift the panel part way out and see that it's being held in by a short ribbon cable with a connector. Pull the connector away from the PC board, being careful to do it slowly and evenly so you don't bend the pins on the PC board connector. It's probably been connected for decades, so it's going to be tightly attached. Notice the battery and fuse on the back of the PCB. The battery is a CR2032 coin cell and should be replaced if the telescope forgets the time and date. The fuse is a 1 amp slow blow type. We need to remove the power panel PC board from the cover plate. They're held together by nuts on the focuser, reticle, and power connectors. We'll remove a washer and nut from each of those connectors. You might be able to detach the PC board now, but it's typical to also have some glue holding the deck motor modular jack to the bottom of the cover plate, which you would need to remove. Notice that you can see the RA drive assembly through the open front. You can reseat the encoder connector here, and with a bit of contortion, adjust the encoder duty cycle as well. Now let's go to the declination drive assembly in the fork arm. To remove that, we start by removing the clutch knob. Then remove the 3 small hex screws holding the plastic cover on. With the cover off, we can easily access the declination drive assembly here to check and reseat the encoder board connector and calibrate the encoder duty cycle. Before we can remove the declination drive assembly from the fork, we need to unplug the fork arm cable coming from the drive. It's plugged into a modular jack just behind the connector labeled deck motor. With that done, we can remove the 2 mounting bolts at the bottom of the drive assembly. It's sometimes tricky to get a good view of these since they're usually in shadow, and the one on the left is covered with some wires. Pull the drive out gently to protect the fork arm cable wires. Be careful not to lose the tensioning spring. There is one on the RA drive as well, and they like to jump out. We've laid the scope down on some folded towels to get at the base. This cover plate is connected by 6 screws, 4 Phillips and 2 hex. But there are 4 hex screws, so why are we only removing the 2 lower ones? The other 2 are not actually connected to the base plate. They're visible through 2 holes in the base plate, but they're actually there to hold a heat sink onto the motor driver ICs and we don't want to detach that. We're just going to remove these screws, and then the cover plate should pop right off. With the base plate off, we can see the heatsink covered in white thermal paste, which is also on the base plate where they contact. This paste gets on everything, so beware. The big round PC board holds the telescope's CPU, memory, motor control, and communication circuits. If you want to know your software revision level, that's printed on stickers on the two ROM chips here. We're looking now at the RA drive assembly. It has a small cable connecting it to the CPU board, which we need to disconnect at the CPU board connector. Then it's just a matter of removing the two mounting bolts, just like what we did with the deck drive. Note though that these mounting bolts are 1/8 inch shorter than the ones for the deck drive, so be careful not to mix them up. The RA drive assembly is similar to the Declination drive, but you can see the tensioning spring more easily since the encoder PCB isn't blocking it. Again, be careful not to lose that spring. With that removed, we can turn our attention to the main PCB, also called the CPU board or the motherboard. We'll next remove the 6 hex screws holding the CPU board onto the base. On many of these scopes, including this one, there are 4 wires, yellow in this case, leading to 2 large resistors which are glued to the inside of the base. We're going to leave those alone today, but if you needed to get your main board all the way out of the base, you would need to pry or cut off that glue and detach the resistors. And with that, we've completed deinstalling this main CPU board. If you were going to handle the board outside the base, make sure you use anti-static protection. Now we'll simply reverse the entire process and reinstall everything. Before reinstalling the RA drive, check that the tensioning spring hasn't escaped. I have better luck inserting the mounting bolt through the drive assembly first, and then feeling for the threaded hole. If you have the Declination drive out as well, remember to use the shorter mounting bolts here on the RA drive. When reinstalling either drive assembly, before tightening the mounting bolts, make sure the side-to-side positioning is centered on the worm gear. If the movement binds later when you test the scope, you'll need to readjust the position until you get smooth movement. Avoid over-tightening the mounting bolts so you don't strip the threads in the aluminum base. Remember to reconnect both ends of the drive assembly cable, so you don't have to go back in and connect it later. Closing up the base is just a matter of replacing the 6 screws we removed before, 4 Phillips and 2 hex. For the declination drive, first thread the fork arm cable through the hole behind the drive and verify that the tensioning spring is still in place. From there, it's similar to the RA drive. Use the adjustment slots to center the worm on the axis of the worm gear, then giving the mounting bolts a final tightening. Don't forget to reconnect the fork arm cable at both ends, inside the fork and on the drive's encoder PC board. To finish the declination drive installation, we just replace and screw on the cover, and then loosely screw in the clutch knob. The last step is reinstalling the power panel. When reconnecting the ribbon cable, take special care that the 2 rows of pins align correctly with the connector. Misalignment is a common mistake and can damage your main CPU board. Reinstalling the Power Panel PCB to the cover plate is just a matter of screwing on the connector hardware. Finally, attach the cover plate to the base with 4 screws and you're done. When we're ready to reconnect everything, check that the power switch is off whenever plugging or unplugging these modular cables. I like to plug the power cable last to make sure. And we're all set. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching.